Welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, V.
And Sean. We interview people in the creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on our social medias if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
Today we have with us MICHAEL GROVER.
Hello.
Welcome
Hi.
to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Stoked to be here.
Your stuff is awesome, and you don't have social media. You do webcomics.
Alert! Rebel alert! Off the grid! We gotta track this guy down!
And you also work in animation.
Yes, all true.
The first question I have is, are you so productive because you don't have social media?
I think that definitely helps. I mean, the reason I got off of social media was because I was addicted to it, right? Like I was just constantly in the feed. And ostensibly, I was on social media for career purposes, right? But it very quickly became obvious that it was a net negative, that I was spending more time looking at other people's stuff and not actually creating stuff. So I do think it helps productivity to not be on social media. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons for it, which we can get into.
Yeah. Before we get into like the thick of it, I want to talk a little bit about, you said that you use social media for professional purposes. Do you feel like it helped you land your first jobs, or like how helpful was it for you to find animation work, I guess, or just work in general?
Yeah, so I do freelance commercial animation to pay the bills. I do a lot of motion graphics work for commercials and sometimes for bands. And then I do comics, which has been on the side for a long time and then recently has become more prominent in my schedule, more comics. But yeah, I pay the bills with motion graphics work, and I pretty much didn't get any work from social media, with the exception of one big job I got from LinkedIn. But like Instagram and Facebook, that wasn't how I got work. Most of my work came from people I knew from school, and then I would kind of get referred from one job to the next. But it wasn't strangers on the internet responding to social media. That wasn't my experience. And honestly, if I had been getting a lot of work from social media, it would have been a lot harder to quit. But it was, for me, it was like using social media was like the worst kind of selling out, where like you sell out, but you don't actually make any money from it. So
I love it.
So it's like, what's the point of selling out? Might as well keep it pure and do things on my own terms.
I love that you didn't get any gigs from social media. That's actually very different from a lot of what our guests have been saying on the podcast up until now. So it's really cool to hear that it's possible to make it without it. You talked about school. Can we know where you went to school?
Yeah, I went to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. They have a pretty good animation program there, and so that's where I went to school. The first time I applied for the program there, I got rejected, and that was a good kick in the pants for me as a 21-year-old looking to do art for a living.
Looking back now, do you understand why you might have gotten rejected at that time?
Yeah, totally. I think at the time I just wasn't focused enough. I think like a lot of kids who go to art school, like you're used to being the drawing kid, the art kid in your high school. And so, yeah, it's a big wake up call to then be around all those kids and realize you really just have to put in the pencil mileage, have to put in the hours. And it took me a year or two to really realize that you got to show up every day and, be putting those laps in.
So cue training montage. What did you do to level up?
Yeah, it was a lot of figure drawing classes, and then the program at BYU. It's built around kind of simulating like a Hollywood studio movie experience, where
interesting.
It's like group projects where you're building a pipeline and everyone has a different job, like rigging and lighting and animation, and so to stand out and get into the program, I had to spend a lot of hours in the computer lab learning Maya. And then it was funny because once I actually got into the program, I was constantly looking for excuses to not work on the group project and just make comics. So that was kind of foreshadowing of what was going to happen while all my classmates went to glamorous studio jobs, and I was like, I'm just gonna do my own thing over here. I'm just gonna keep cranking out my own comics.
That's so cool. I love that you were. How did you feel like seeing all your peers going to like Hollywood, like or whatever? And like, were you jealous at all, or were you just like, no, this is like my path. Like comics is where I want to be.
It was a little bit of both. I definitely have felt jealous when people I know are working on cool, prominent projects. But then sometimes the other thing happens when the industry is in disarray, and I'm talking to them about that. I feel I feel a little smug over here. Maybe that's gonna make me some enemies saying that.
It's not so bad being scrappy now, is it? Where all the studios betray you.
Yeah,
It's so true though. It's so true though.
But,
I feel like I don't know. We're like all of us in LA are just kind of like, what have we done? What are we doing with our
Why
lives?
did I sell my why did I work so long for these shows for shows that I don't like?
I mean, we say that, but like, we worked on a couple of shows we liked.
But I'm also addicted to it. I'm gonna go back. No.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. That's so funny. That is so cool. Like, and so how did you land your first gig? After going, because you said you learned Maya in school? Because I saw you use a little bit of 3D in your comics.
Yeah. So I learned Maya in school, and then I also got a job while I was in school. So at BYU, they have a TV channel called BYU TV, which actually has pretty big viewership because they do like family-friendly sketch comedy. They have this channel called Studio C, and so they hire students to like work on the post-production. And so I was doing motion graphics for Studio C, and that's how I learned After Effects and realized that that's like the easiest kind of work to get in the animation industry is After Effects work, because every city in the country has businesses that need some kind of explainer video or some kind of graphics on their YouTube ads. And so when I finished school, I thought maybe I was going to try to go to LA and be a storyboard artist. And then After Effects work was just kind of falling into my lap. And I was like, maybe I'll just do this. Maybe I'll just freelance. Because I could never like bring myself to put together like a real storyboard portfolio. Because again, I wanted to make comics and make finished work on the side. And I was intimidated. I felt like maybe at that time, I really don't think I had the chops to get any kind of, Hollywood work. So it wasn't really an intentional thought process. But like coming out of school, I was already married and had a kid. I got married like when I was actually right before I got into the animation program, and then had a baby a year later. And so coming out of school, it was like, all right, what's the first thing I can do to make money? And that was motion graphics work.
That's really cool. I was just, as you were talking, I was looking up BYU TV because I was like, this sounds familiar. And they got like sort of big. Like they have this, like, probably going to pronounce it wrong, Granite Flats.
Yeah, Granite Flats. Yep.
That was got really big. I was kind of reading up on it because they also have this animated show that's kind of recent. What was it called? Yeah, I just think it's cool that it's like a channel that's like slowly kind of like doing like good viewership, I think, because like you said, it's like family friendly.
Yeah, so it was really good as a student to get that kind of experience right out the gate.
Is it okay to ask you about like your faith? Do you have like, are you religious? Is this something I'm interested in asking because of your comic too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm religious. So yeah, BYU is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I am a member of that church. I did 2 years as a missionary in Thailand before starting the animation program. And so, yeah, my faith is definitely a big part of my life, and, a contributor to me starting a family young. And then I'm not interested in making like preachy work or anything that's overtly, trying to convert anybody. But it definitely bleeds through, right? So the biblical themes in Hamburglar Goes to Hell, they're definitely in there, even if it's more about, showing Ronald McDonald as the devil than it is about trying to put across any specific doctrine.
It's really funny because it's so I read Hamburglar in Hell and I was like, this is such a crazy comic. So everybody, you should just like go to grovertoons.com and check it out because it's really funny. It's animated too, which is pretty insane. It's like it looks like it was a lot of work.
Yeah, it took a long time.
And it's like this very like almost like psychedelic descent into hell, but it's still really fun. It's still very fun. It doesn't feel like it's too like it's kind of like a fun version of hell. If I can say so.
Yeah, the joke that I really liked about Hamburglar Goes to Hell was I wanted to start with like really lowbrow subject matter, right? Because the McDonald's mascots, you know, they're these ad mascots and their purpose is to sell garbage food to children, right? Like it's it's very fundamentally lowbrow. So I wanted to start with that, but then try to tell a completely earnest redemption story with it. Like something about that was very funny to me. Like can we elevate these characters? And not that, you know, I do have affection for those character designs, like, and nostalgia for them. Like they're very fun.
Yeah.
But then to have them be like totally deadly serious was kind of a fun narrative challenge.
Yeah, it's so funny, and there's music to it too. I think that's the cool thing about your webcomics is that you're utilizing the full breadth of what a webcomic can be.
Yeah, what made you get into trying to combine a listening experience with comics?
Yeah, so as I was finishing up school and deciding that I really wanted to work on comics, I was like, man, it's kind of a bummer that I just spent all this time learning animation and I'm not even gonna like really be focusing on that as like my end goal. And so I was just thinking of ways to kind of incorporate stuff that I learned how to do in school. And so, you know, and I had seen people like Anthony Holden or Thunderpaw is a comic by with Repo Ghost, Benji. I don't remember their full name, but there are these comics on Tumblr that use animated GIFs. So I wanted to try that, and then I was just like, what else can I throw at it? Like, what else can I layer on top of this to make it different? And I had a friend who had sent me some tracks, a musician. I was in a band in college and was friends with people in the music scene around Provo, Utah. And he had just sent me these random tracks, and so I threw that on top of some of these comics, and just kind of gradually pieced together an approach that seemed like it would work and be additive to the reading experience and not distracting from it. Like I never wanted it to feel like you have to stop reading the comic to press play and watch something. I wanted it to still feel like you could fly through it at the normal pace of reading something, but have these extra elements to it.
Yeah, it's really cool because like when I was reading it, sometimes I would like press play and pause on the music, and then depending on where I was scrolling on the comic, it will trigger the music differently. Like you have like a different areas of the comic that will play a different track.
Yeah. So the music is by my friend Eric Robertson, and then the code under the hood to make that work is by my friend Andrew Jensen. Yeah, that was a big breakthrough working with him and figuring out that we could do that as you scroll through the comic, the music can change, kind of like in a video game where you can go into a different room and the music shifts. It really unlocked some possibilities there, and that was very exciting.
That's so cool. Like honestly, when I noticed that, I was like, damn, this guy, he like really thought about this.
It's an experience. It's a full, you're curating a full experience, which is something that you usually don't get from a read through on a regular webcomics page or on most social media. And
yeah,
that's
and
cool.
and you don't get that on Webtoons or like some of these like online webcomic reading platforms because they're not built for it. And yeah, and you can only get that through having your own website.
Yeah, and that definitely contributed to me wanting to get off of social media, because around that time that I quit using Instagram, I was thinking, like, what is the coolest possible thing that I could think of making that I know how to make? And, you know, I want to make work that has kind of a creative purity to it and that feels punk rock and DIY. And really social media companies are antithetical to that, right? Like it was kind of like an epiphany for me to realize that social media companies are not cool. Like they try to trick us into thinking that they're cool because they have these cool origin stories of like a guy in a garage and all the cool people are on there posting cool stuff. but the stuff being posted on there is cool in spite of social media, but not because of it, right? Like social media companies, I mean, we all know this, right? But they're these big monolithic advertising companies, and that's like the lamest thing I can think of, right? And so that was kind of a light bulb moment for me, that it's like, okay, if I want to be as pure and creative as possible, then probably the best reader experience is going to take place off of these platforms. And it's so hard to get people to click out of those programs, right?
Yeah,
because
true.
when someone's in the feed, then they just want to keep scrolling and scrolling. And that's how we all are, right? When we're using them, you just want to turn off your brain.
Yeah.
That's how they're engineered too. Like that's the whole point of them. That's like the algorithm is designed that way.
And it's so exciting, you know, like initially it's exciting, like when you see people liking your post, but when you think about most of the time how people are engaging your work, it's just like you are in a sea of other things called content, and people are flicking through at light speed, and they might like your thing, but maybe they didn't go check out the rest of your stuff. They just looked at it for a second, but half of the time on mute, and then maybe they liked it, maybe they didn't, and then they scrolled away, and you're not getting the same sort of earnest, like in-depth interaction that you could, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. You're like you said, you're in this sea of content. And so I do hope that by leaving social media, like my audience is very small now, and I think it probably would be a lot bigger if for the last couple of years I had been posting on social media. But my hope is that the people that are reading my stuff and that are on my email list are engaging with it on a deeper level, and they're engaging with it on my terms. I'm kind of inviting them to come into my little insular world off of social media and see it the way I want to present it. And so, yeah, hopefully it's a more meaningful experience for them and more memorable, and something where, you know, even if they don't sign up for the email list, or even if they don't get any kind of notification, they'll remember it and come back to it later. That's the hope. That's the goal.
It's interesting because there is a little bit of a like, oh, it's the guy that I can only engage with through the website. Like, you know, it's kind of that thing when you're like I mean, there like hipsters are gone, right? Like we don't say hipsters anymore, but I guess like, you know, when you're like looking for like the very like indie thing that nobody knows about, and like you're kind of creating that value around your work by having it be kind of like out of reach,
You're
which
rare.
is really
You're
interesting.
like a little unicorn, and people are trying to catch you if they find you.
I was gonna ask you how you because like, you know, you're not on social media, and you said that you feel like your audience is pretty small. Like, how do you make it work financially for you, like in terms of like doing comics and like animation?
Yeah, so definitely doing the commercial jobs has paid the bills for most of the time. And then this past year, my big break was getting a publishing deal for my webcomic, Deeply Dave. So that's going to be published as a graphic novel by Macmillan in 2025.
Woo.
And so that was the first time I've gotten like any substantial money from comics, was the advance for that publishing deal. Prior to that, I would make a couple bucks here and there from selling t-shirts or bonus stuff on the website. And I hope to be able to get more of that as my audience grows, and maybe do more with crowdfunding and, you know, a Patreon kind of model. But for now, yeah, it's been money from publishing, and then subsidizing that with freelance work.
It's funny because I was thinking about it as I was reading like Hamburglar. I was like, how do you make merch from it? Because it's not your characters.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you didn't make the angel
bootleg stuff, just like bootleg merch, you know.
Yeah, I did make a T-shirt with the burger angel. Here, I'll draw that on here, where it's got the multiple eyes and the 6 wings, like the seraphim in the Bible. Yeah. So I felt like the McDonald's lawyers wouldn't come after me for that. Though it would be, talking about trying to make things punk rock, it would be pretty punk rock to have a cease and desist letter I could put up on the website right in front of the comic.
I love that you're like so punk rock in like spirit, and that you're also like committed to your faith. Like how does do these like two like philosophies coexist?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because artists are typically the ones trying to push the limits, right, and be on the cutting edge of all the new ideas, and then religion is more rooted in traditional values, right? So so definitely they can be at odds sometimes. And so I think when someone has both of those in their life, when you're in the art world and also in like more conservative religious spaces, for me, I think it's helped me have a lot of empathy for people on both sides of the aisle. And when there's, really contentious like social discussion happening, honestly, I just feel really stressed out because I feel like I see where everyone's coming from. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good to be talking to people in both of those spaces. And it's not like religion is inherently conservative all the time, or that art is inherently progressive all the time either.
Yep.
Sure.
I think there's lots of overlap. Jesus was pretty punk rock. He was pretty.
I'm not gonna lie. That is something that I would imagine like a youth camp counselor saying, like, "Listen, guys, I know you like your hip jams, but I'll tell you who's punk rock, Jesus." But yeah, no, I get you though.
Yeah, and then I'll bang on my acoustic guitar some amazing grace.
But but it's true though, like, because there was like two sides of like these two kind of like philosophies can coexist. And like, for example, my grandma, she's like very Catholic, but she was also kind of like with the feminist movement. So she was kind of like she's not like the new agey Catholic, but she's kind of that vibe of like social justice, but still very Catholic, which is like a subset that is more like that. There's like more people in that subset than you would think, which is really interesting. Because it's like at the core, like the values are like love everybody, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're balancing multiple points of view in your head at the same time, it's a more nuanced perspective, and so that's not a perspective that's going to like get a lot of traction or be like. That's not like saying like, oh, everybody has a good point. Like that's not the algorithm isn't going to feed that, right? So you're not going to hear that as often. But I think you're right that there are a lot of people that coexist in those spaces.
Do you feel like that was also a thing that kind of like turned you off social media? That fact that it's like the outrage algorithm, and that only the posts that strokes everybody's
posts.
anger, like the controversy posts, are the one that get pushed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hate that about social media, and even not being on social media, it still exists on the internet in general to an extent, but definitely when things are algorithmically pushed, it exasperates that side of humanity. And so it's way better for my mental well-being to not be staring at a news feed all the time, and I find other ways to distract myself with the internet that are maybe almost as bad, but getting off of news feeds has been very liberating. I'll say at this point, I can't necessarily advocate for getting rid of social media as being a good business decision because I don't know yet, right? Like I'm kind of in the middle of an experiment myself to see like, okay, is it possible for me to be a successful independent artist and build a really big audience without social media? Like that's my mission, is to see if I can prove that. And I don't know yet. I'm still in the middle of it. Well, but I can definitely say that creatively it's super liberating. And as far as my like mental well-being, it's fantastic. I can definitely recommend it for that.
Well, I'm curious about how, if there are ways that, if you're not putting your energy into social media, if there are ways that you are working on and figuring out that are alternative. Like, do you do like in-person conventions? Do you have other ways that you find artist collectives to talk to other artists? Like, how do you cultivate, I personally find a network of artist friends an important thing for inspiring me. I was wondering if you've had an alternative way of sort of, meeting other artists and finding new fans.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that I'm trying right now, and some are working better than others. But yeah, like the in-person events is something I just started experimenting with and I want to do more of. So I just did like a screening of Hamburglar Goes to Hell at a comic book shop during their Halloween party, and we put it up on a TV, and so the music is going and the looping animation is going as I scroll through, and then I got like a voice transformer box that I could loop a mic into so that I could change the pitch of my voice as I was reading the comic, like doing the different characters. And so like, yeah, I think that's kind of a unique experience, like a unique way to screen something and show it off. And then like I think about when I would go see bands when I was in college, and sometimes they weren't even especially good, but because I had shared this moment with them in real physical space, like I still go back and listen to their music years later.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. I feel like there's definitely a bunch of bands that I would not have listened to if I only had found them on Spotify.
Yeah, if you see them in person, you feel like they're your buddy, even if you only saw them that one time. And so I want to try
social relationships. That's an interesting new way to think about.
We're taking the internet off the internet. It's the internet in real life. I'm just gonna go door to door. I was a missionary. I can do that. I'm just gonna knock on your door.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
Hey, do you wanna read
Friend
my
request?
comics?
Friend request. Here's a page.
Yeah, you wanna give me a thumbs up?
It's interesting. It's interesting because when you read interviews of comic artists before the internet, like a lot of the times they would have that story of like, yeah, I would like go to the print shop and like copy, like Xerox my comics and just sell them to whoever would buy them, which I feel is like crazy because you would have to go like to an actual person face to face and be like, hey, do you want to buy this? But yeah, you mentioned like being a missionary, and I always think that's like super interesting because you said you were 2 years in Thailand. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I learned how to speak Thai and read Thai, and we were just out on bikes every day, going around talking to people, and yeah, it was very cool. I mean, there's very strict rules when you're a missionary, so there was no watching movies or listening to pop music or dating or anything for 2 years, which when I first started was like a total shock to my system. Like I was in major withdrawal from like listening to rock music for the first couple months.
Wow.
I had no idea how dependent on it I was, how dependent on just like entertainment I was, until you just go cold turkey like that. But yeah, it was a great experience. Met a lot of cool people, learned a lot about the world. I learned how to eat spicy food. I didn't grow up eating anything with spice in it, and then went to Thailand where they just like load peppers into everything, and everyone would make fun of me for having like red lips and be sweating while I was trying to eat this stuff.
Now, did you keep count like Legolas and Gimli when they're counting how many people they slayed? Did you keep count of how many people that you feel like you won the heart over? like secretly where you're like, another one, and then you like scratch a little tally into your wall because you don't have a TV. You're just like carving this little tally.
No, I think I did. I think we would like, yeah, because that was something you weren't supposed to like brag about, right? Because like it's not about the numbers, like it's about the people. But no, everyone did. Everyone
you're
definitely
secretly keeping tally. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you what that number is now because I haven't thought about that in years. But yeah.
That's so funny. Oh my God. Yeah, like wow, like it's crazy to think that you were, like I don't know what I would do if I couldn't listen to music for like 2 years. I mean, I guess I could. I mean, people can adapt. Like humans are pretty adaptable. But yeah, thinking about it, I'm like,
do you think that was the first step to you realizing that like knowing what you can go without, like it, and then pulling out of social media, like because that's a drastic transition. You go to all of a sudden you're not listening to the podcasts all the time or music or whatever.
how old were you though? Wait, how old were you?
I
when
was
you were
19. Yeah.
19. Okay, so like at the time there wasn't that much.
There
Like,
weren't a lot of
podcasts and
podcasts
stuff.
around
Not
then,
podcasts
then,
but
yeah.
plenty. But yeah, I definitely had my iPod that I
Music and pop
left at
and all
home.
that stuff.
So
iPod. We're so old.
Yeah. yeah, 'cause I don't know how old you guys are. I'm 32. So
Yeah,
it was 2010 that I was a missionary.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I'm 34, so
Okay,
I'm
yeah, pretty
I
similar.
33.
graduated. Yeah.
All right, look at us.
Yeah.
We're bragging with our
We all know
numbers.
about iPods. We all know
Yeah.
about iPods.
But yeah, to answer your question, Sean, I hadn't made that connection before, but I think that's definitely true. That going through that experience as a missionary taught me that I could go without certain things for a long time. You know, it was instructive to me to know that I could learn a language, right? Like I didn't know that I was capable of doing that before being kind of thrown into it. And I think that was helpful when I had to learn software in animation school. Like it kind of gave me this confidence that if you put in the hours on something, that you can figure it out.
I love that. I think it's so interesting that you bring that up because I do feel like so for me, I have never been a missionary. But I did move to the US when I was 13, 14, and I had to learn to speak English because I spoke no English. And
That's got to be a hard age to move to a different country.
I think I just didn't really know what was going on. If that makes any sense. My dad was like, "We're moving, and what are you gonna do? You're 13. You're not gonna be like, no, we're not." It's like you're just have to do it, right? And then my dad was so funny. He was like, it's too expensive to send you guys to French school. You're just gonna go to American public school." I was like, okay. Nobody spoke any French. So you're just like, all right, well, I don't understand anything. But I still managed to get almost straight A's right off the bat. So you don't really have to speak English to get straight A's in public school.
In
What?
English class? But
I
there's an
gotta be.
English class.
I gotta be. No, but here's the trick, everybody. The trick is in public school, they let you keep the book for the test. So it's like, how is this a test? Because there you could just look at the pages and you can find the words. If you have a good pattern recognition, you can fill in the answer.
Oh my God.
You don't need to speak the language.
Did you speak a little bit of English?
Tiny.
Yeah.
Like I knew things like stuff like my name is, and could count to like 1,000, and I couldn't do math.
1,000.
No, but I couldn't do things like one. Like I didn't know how to to say a math equation in English. Like I knew 1, I knew 5. I could read a math equation because math is universal, but I couldn't say it. Like I couldn't say square root or like divided by or like that kind of stuff. Like I didn't know the words.
So how long did it take you to feel like you really knew English?
I think I could just like feel like I could get around within like 6 months to 8 months, and then after a year ish, that's when I was like, I'm starting to realize now there's a gap in culture. So it took first you. And how was your experience for you with? Well, I guess you were around a lot of other Americans, so maybe you didn't have that much of a cultural like whiplash because it's like you have other people that are like the same culture around you. But
yeah, it's true. Yeah, we mostly lived with other Americans, and then there were a few times where my partner, or the companion is what they call him, was Thai and didn't speak English, and so there were a few times where I was more immersed than other times. But yeah, I think it was a similar thing for me where after 6 or 8 months, like you said, I could kind of get the hang of what was going on, and then about a year in, I felt comfortable like going around and talking to people and teaching by myself without having someone else helping me. But yeah, I think also around that time was when I realized like, oh, no one has had any idea what I've been saying for the past year. Like that's like you start to realize that culture gap, like you're saying, like everyone's been smiling and nodding when I've been saying stuff, and they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Oh my God.
Dude, this is the most frustrating thing. Like that happened to me so many times. So when I was trying to speak English for the first time, and because first of all, I learned British English, and on top of that, I had a horrible French accent. So people were like, I don't know what sounds are coming out.
Sophie was running around saying aluminium.
No, but it did, like, I did, what that did happen to me, like, this is such a cartoon thing, but it's like, it did happen to me that I was in math class, and I, like, the boy that was sitting in front of me, I was like, hey, do you have a rubber? And he looked at me like, you're fucking crazy. And I was like, what? Like a rubber to erase. And then he was like,
Oh man,
mm-hmm.
He
That's
was
a
like,
good
"Are you
one.
An eraser.
propositioning me?"
Yeah, he was like, what the fuck are you? Yeah. And I was just, and then like years later, I was like, oh my God,
Oh no.
it happened.
yeah, yeah.
Well, were you drawing during any of this time? Like like I'm trying to, yeah, instead of watching things, were you drawing instead? Were you reading?
Oh, when I was a missionary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not doing a whole lot of drawing. There wasn't really time for that. Like we had a pretty strict schedule where we'd get up in the morning and we'd study scriptures and then study Thai language, and then you'd go out and be talking to people and teaching and on your feet all day, and then you'd come back home and you'd plan the next day, and then we would have you'd have like half an hour of free time before going to bed usually, and usually you were just toast, like you're just so tired by the end of that. So yeah, like I would read every write in a journal every now and then. I would doodle. Writing letters home was a big thing.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was a full 2 years where I wasn't really working on creative projects, which all throughout high school I had been working on comics and animation, so that was like an adjustment as well, right? That I would always have ideas pop in my head, and there wasn't really anything I could do with them for a while. And so you just kind of learn to focus that creative energy into what you're doing day to day instead. But it was super liberating and exciting to be able to come home and start working on things again.
Do you feel like would you say that Deeply Dave in any shape or form has been like a little bit influenced by that part of your life? Like, 'cause he's kind of like exploring and stuff, right?
Yeah, good question. I mean, yeah, maybe on like a deep psychological level, not in a conscious way. I hadn't connected those experiences specifically, but it's like the mission was a formative experience, right? Like your childhood is formative, and so it influences everything, right? I'd imagine your experience in high school, that probably continues to impact your comics, even if it's not explicit, right?
I think so. I don't know. It's kind of hard. Sometimes I don't know if you ever do that, but sometimes I go back in my comics and I try to look at them like I'm like, I'm gonna shrink myself when I look at it. I'm like, what was I trying to say? And then I'm like, sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, I gotta move past that. Because like a part of me is like, I don't know if you ever feel this, but I'm often like, one of the things I'm the most worried about is writing the same story over and over and over and over again with just different characters. And I feel like, and this is just me rambling now, but I feel like if you don't grapple with some of your personal, intimate, whatever trauma, like you're gonna get stuck in a loop and you're gonna make the same story forever, if that makes sense.
That is very interesting. Yeah, I'm interested in digging into that a litto bit.
That's very
what's the story? What's the story that you keep telling over and over again, V?
I used to draw a lot of stories that were about a character in the world where there is nothing. So, and there's like always a I think the most relevant comic about that is Nebo, which is a comic that I'm actually very surprised that people really enjoy. But it's when I looked back on it, it's an allegory, suicidal ideation. So
wait a second, Nebo, is that with the turtle?
Yeah.
Ah, I didn't know you made that.
Oh,
no way.
Yeah.
I saw that back 10 years ago. When you made that when I was in college, I remember thinking that was super dope.
Oh hell yeah! Wow, thank you so much.
Wait,
dude.
how do I
so
find
happy.
that? I'm trying to look at it again.
You would
Nebo.
have
How do you spell Nebo?
Neebo. You can read it on Webtoons, or you would have to scroll way back on my Instagram.
Okay, well, I'll find it later, but that's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm so happy. I for the longest time I was very not ashamed, but like I thought it was so cringy. I was like, oh, it's so cringy. I think, but because it's like so like it's not like super edgy, but like the feelings in it are pretty raw, and it's like stuff that I actually felt. And when you do that and you make yourself so vulnerable, you're like, I'm so cringy.
That's funny that
So
that's how you feel about it, because I mean, I have to read it again, but I feel like it's very poetic and it doesn't seem explicitly about, like, I wouldn't read that and be like, oh, I know what this person's issues are, not at all.
oh, nice.
Like it felt very, I don't know, just layered and interesting, and there was like emotional truth to it. That's what I remember from reading it before.
I think that's a symptom of good writing. I think that a lot, it's a skill to be able to take personal, relatable experience and then put it into a character and make the reader believe that it's about that character, and they're not, taken out of it being like the writer's just writing about how fucked up they are. Like
Yeah, but to
Yeah.
be fair, that's the thing that's really hard because I did make a comic after Nebo that was kind of hinging on the same themes, and I was like, this one's way too cringy. That one's because I was kind of like they were talking too much. I think I do better when I just do like visual, and when I do more like stream of consciousness kind of writing, because then you can just kind of, I feel like you can type into your unconscious a little better. I don't know if that's how you feel, Mike, because your comics feel a little bit like stream of consciousness ish. Would you like, is that how you think about them?
That's good if that's how it feels to you, because I think it's the opposite. I do a lot of plotting and a lot of
Really?
iteration. Yeah, it's super important to me to have like a pretty tight outline on things before I can really make it. And I'll do multiple versions of a comic all the way through. Like even with Deeply Dave, I released that episodically in 6 episodes, but I had the whole thing roughed out before I released the first episode, because yeah, my process is definitely of like going back over something over and over and over again and kind of refining it and trying to put in setups and payoffs. So yeah, my process is very plot heavy.
That's so crazy. We're like so different. I'm like the complete opposite. I just like I draw final pages and I'm like done. And then I'm like, it's a problem for future.
Yeah, I admire that courage, because I do not have that. Like I'm terrified of doing that. I would
Oh, yeah?
love to do something that's more stream of consciousness, just because it seems like that would be liberating. But I feel like I would just be like the whole time being like, oh, this would be so much better if I had like put in a setup earlier. So I think I would really struggle with that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to try it sometime, doing something that's more like a daily stream of conscious kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me wish that I had done more long form serious work, like comics or whatever it is. I think that when I started off making cartoons, I was trying to rebel against doing anything serious so hard, because I had just come from doing fine art, and then I realized that I didn't want to do fine art anymore, so I didn't want anything to be serious, and I think I overcompensated by making things too hollow. So when I think about the trends in my cartoons, it's more trends in types of jokes that I keep repeating, rather than trends in stories.
I think it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I very much relate to that. I feel like there was a moment too when I don't know if any of you guys have felt that, but like there's moments when you want to be vulnerable with your art, but then there's a moment when you're like, oh, like this is like like it gets scary because you're like it's too real and I
Yeah.
don't want people to see
Well-
me how I am. So then you can hide behind comedy, right? Like comedy's great because it's such a nice shield to be like, look, it's funny and
Yeah.
nobody's
Yeah.
feelings are getting hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that says about me, that the stuff that I think that I find the most funny are its jokes in an almost like dissociative, like empty way, with empty characters that could explode in the next moment, and everything is so ridiculous that nothing matters. And I think that's something that in recent years I've tried to combat, and try to figure out like how does my sense of humor and the jokes that I want to tell, how does that mesh with trying to tell a story where you care about the characters and the characters last, and you're trying to sympathize with the characters, because that's
Hmm.
I probably didn't start trying to tell stories like that until, I don't know, maybe like 4 years ago.
Oh yeah, huh? How'd you go about creating characters, Mike? How'd you like think about your characters when you make comics?
I guess I usually start with a concept. Like for Deeply Dave, it was the idea of a a child looking for their parent in this kind of ethereal space, and then I built characters around those themes and those ideas, and I guess at the same time I'm kind of doodling designs and trying to come up with an appealing design, and so it's like a slow process of marrying like vague themes and ideas with things that visually look cool, and then trying to inject like a specific voice into it. But yeah, Sean, I think I relate to what you're saying. Like it is a hard balance of how do you make something funny, but then also have people care about it and emotionally invested in it, because those can be at odds with each other all the time.
Mhm.
And like sometimes the like Marvel superhero movies get criticized for kind of undercutting their emotional themes by always kind of winking at the camera, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's a common impulse. Like that's something I struggle to balance with too, and it's hard sometimes to find a cartoon where it's both really funny and there's suspense to it, and you're like worried about what's going to happen to the characters.
I kind of draw a parallel in between. Sometimes, I think I think sometimes, as we start off as illustrators or artists, we have a tendency to overcompensate for either the drawing, the idea, or like the main shapes of a drawing. We try to compensate by filling it with a bunch of detail in lines, like so much detail, so many lines, and that's to cover up that maybe the core of the drawing either isn't a good drawing, or it's not a good idea for a character, or it's not a funny joke. I think that I do in the past I've done the same thing with jokes. I'll pump it through with I'll pump a cartoon full of so much humor and funny things and funny faces, and that sometimes it'll either be covering used to compensate for the overall arcing joke of the cartoon not being super funny, or for the story not being super good.
Mm.
Yeah, it takes a lot of confidence to do anything minimally, right? Like minimalism
Yep.
takes the most confidence. Or even like in my work, like when I was in school, I remember really struggling with learning to draw in perspective, and learning anatomy and just like kind of concrete drawing skills that everybody has to learn in art school. Like that was really a struggle for me. And then once I kind of had a basic grasp of the fundamentals, it was like scary to not use them all the time. And
Yeah.
like it was mind blowing when I started to see some of these artists who would just straight up not use perspective, who would just like intentionally just murder the perspective rules and
You're
draw.
like, the professor's
you
gonna
know.
mark your drawing down.
Yeah,
What
you
are
know,
you
like
doing?
draw a cup like this with like a flat bottom, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like I was so excited when I saw artists doing that. Like there's one John Jones Studio is a guy online who did that, and or like Victoria Vincent Vian,
Yes, I was
right?
gonna
Like,
bring her up.
yeah,
I
like
was like, she does that a lot. She's awesome.
yeah, like it's so cool, and it takes so much confidence, and I've been trying to do more of that in the last few years. Like just own the fact that I'm not using perspective and not using anatomy, but it's an intentional aesthetic choice.
Mhm.
Yeah, you've surpassed it. You've surpassed
That's
it.
right. I don't need it
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah, I still can't draw in perspective, and
Oh,
I can't
no.
draw with do good figure drawings. Yeah, it's just a new crutch.
I feel like, I don't know, it's funny because I when I started storyboarding, I was really bad at perspective, and I was like really scared about starting out in boards because I was like, I can't like am I gonna have to draw like perspective points and all that stuff all the time? And I was like, it's gonna take forever, and eventually I just realized like, oh, you just have to draw nice compositions. Like perspective doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, it's about the design.
Yeah. If it's like designed really well, then you can be not. You don't have to be that good at perspective.
Yeah.
We're giving away
Yeah,
secrets
It took
before the paywall here. I'm just kidding.
I have a lot of respect for you guys doing storyboard work though, because that's like all the hardest parts without any of the fun parts of doing comics. Like you don't get any of the break. You don't get any of the reward of just like chilling out and doing some inking and coloring.
Honestly, yeah. Like I've been like, for people who are like religiously listening to every episode of Creative Blogs are
Just
going to notice a
ranting
trend.
every episode about
Yeah, every
storyboards.
episode I get on my soapbox and I'm like, storyboarding's hard. It's so hard. And like, as I'm like getting older, I'm like, can I keep doing this? Can I keep doing this for like 10 more years? Especially after like doing comics on a more regular basis. Because like you said, like comics is, I mean, it's not like just easy peasy. It's not like a walk in the park, but it's so much easier and more fun. It's so much more fun.
It still has the hard part in it, but that's just one of the parts.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then you get a little break, right? You do some writing, then you do some storyboarding, then you get to zone out for a little while.
But you don't also have to be thinking about what the next like 10 people working on the shot after you are going to need to do, and whether you're fucking them over by making it too complicated, or how are they going to clean this up, or do you have to reuse a background, or else the background people are going to get mad, or like there's all these other concerns like besides the storytelling. And also you can tell your story rather than trying to mind read whatever was in the script writer's head, you know, and then getting notes when it doesn't when it doesn't line up with what they were imagining, you know.
Yep. Yeah, see, this is where again I sit back and I'm all smug like, yeah, I knew I shouldn't have moved to LA. I knew I was right. But then, you know, I see my friends in the credits and I'm like, that's pretty cool though. That's pretty awesome to get to work on a movie.
I feel like okay. I don't know, Sean.
Hot take. Hot take is coming.
Hot take.
Hot take is coming.
I feel like being in the credits is just kind of okay. I don't. Once I saw my name like as one of the credits, I'm like, I don't know. I don't really get a lot of.
What about
joy
the first
from
time? Was the first time pretty cool?
No, I think the
First
one
time was
time
cool.
that it's cool.
What was the first time for both of you?
I think for me, like, because the thing is, I started my career in France, where like French cartoons, nobody really watches them, so it's kind of like you're kind of working into the void. But Loud House, I've had a couple of people reach out to me, like people like my elementary school teacher was like, "Hey, I saw your name in the credits, and it's really cool." And
that's
then
cool. Yeah.
Somebody from my family, like when there's people from your family that is like completely uninterested in cartoons, and like writes you a little email or whatever, and you're like, "We saw your name on TV," you're like, okay, that's sweet. But like, that's just one email and you have a dopamine for like 5 seconds.
I think the first thing that I saw on TV was actually a short that I had made. I would make shorts for this company called Fox ADHD, and they also had a TV block, and they had this small portion of the TV block where they would just air shorts on.
Was that
Fox.
Liquid Television? Is that?
It was like Liquid
else?
Television, but it was basically like at one point Fox tried to make an Adult Swim for late night adult animation, and for a little bit we were like making shows and shorts for that, and I remember seeing that, and I don't know if I've ever cared as much about seeing the name in the credits as much as like, oh, that's my like, it's a real thing, my drawing is up there. But yeah, I feel like the credits thing wears off a little bit for sure. Which sounds so ungrateful to all the people listening, or like I just want one name in the credit, you know, like, and we're like throwing our names on the credits on the ground and like stomping it out and like I don't even care about that.
No, but I do think, I mean, I do want this perspective to be out there a little bit, just because it's also like at the end of the day, you're working for a company, and it's like, and yes, your name is in the credit, but at the end of the day, you're making work for the company, and it's like it is still like commercial work in a sense. Like it's like you can pitch ideas, but it's not going to be you 100%. It's not like, look at how I contributed to like deeply to this franchise, right? It's like I was
Yeah.
hired to do this thing, and I did the job, and they were happy, and and that's you know what I mean.
Like imagine if workers at like a paper factory at like Dunder Mifflin,
Yes,
you know what I mean? Imagine if
yes.
Dunder Mifflin or a paper factory, like on the packages of papers, they printed everyone who worked at the office's names, and then everyone, like the first time they buy a ream of paper, and they're like, look, it says really small. It says Sean Glaze on this ream of paper. I did it, and I was part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's funny that other jobs don't have that, and we have we have this credit system where, I guess we're doing like an art thing, and that's like if
Because
you do
it's
art, you
crazy
earn a
because
shout out.
we
You know?
we yeah we
Yeah,
we
we're a bunch of
get the
narcissists. We gotta.
no, but here's the thing: we get the credits in movies, but people who work in fine arts don't get credits, and people like Murakami
Yep,
or Jeff
they
Koons,
sign it.
or they don't. There's the name of the director, whoever the artist is, but the whole freaking
Oh,
studio,
true.
their names are nowhere to be found. So if you're like a painter for Murakami, nobody's gonna ever know unless it's
That
in
is
your
interesting.
LinkedIn. You know what I mean? And I think it's really
Let's
interesting
bring
because it's
down the
like,
painting system. I want to see credits on every painting. I want to see credits of all the interns and all the the painters' assistants. We got to unionize these painting assistants.
and they make so much money anyway. That's a
I think
big
there's
tangent.
different aspects of job satisfaction, right? Like
Right.
like there's a few layers to it. Like there's, do you enjoy actually showing up at work and doing the job like day to day? Do you like your coworkers? Do you like your boss?
Mm-hmm.
There's that part of it. And then there's also the like am I contributing to something bigger than myself? Like, is the
Mhm.
end thing cool? And I think
Mhm.
different people value those things differently. For some people, it doesn't matter what the end product is as long as they like their coworkers and they like coming in every day. And for other people, I feel like it's okay if they suffer day to day, if at the end of a year or whatever they feel really proud of it. And I think that exists even outside of art. Like, I have a friend who is an engineer and he works on rockets, and I asked him, like, as an engineer, do you care if the thing is cool at the end? Like, would you be just as happy if you were engineering a toaster as you are doing a rocket? And he was like, it's very important to me that the final thing is cool. Like, he's like,
Oh,
I
just like, yeah.
very much want to be working on rockets, and I do not want to be engineering a toaster.
I got fired for engineering a toaster that could explode and shoot off the ground, and
But
I
then
realized I
imagine
had to
if you
change
like
careers.
engineered, like, what's the thing that everybody has now in their hands, like an iPhone?
A gun,
I guess
a
it's
knife,
cool.
a blunt. No, this is a very adult podcast now.
What about like, oh Mike, what about you and like your work, as in like your
Freelance.
money making, freelance work and your comics work? Because I'm sure if you're doing comics on the side, it's like you have like a itch to scratch that the freelance work isn't.
Yeah.
You sound like
Yeah,
you're itchy.
Itchy.
Yeah, when I'm working on freelance, when I'm doing commercial work, I do think more and more, if I'm getting creative fulfillment from my comics, then I don't care if the freelance work is especially creatively fulfilling, as long as it's a pleasant experience and like the client is cool and like it's not that hard, you know?
Now here's a question: when you are feeling super invested in your comic, do you specifically look for easy, non-emotional, non-committed freelance work that you can emotionally detach from, so on purpose, so that you have more emotional, fuel to dump on the creative fire? That's
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as much as possible, I just want to be working on comics. And so my freelance work, most of the time, there are exceptions to this, but most of the time I'm looking for a good paycheck. And like, it's not going to be that consuming to work on it. A few exceptions have been when I've like worked on something for a band that I really liked, and then I'm willing to like work extra, like beyond what I'm being compensated for, because I think it's cool and it's fun. And especially if the people I'm working for appreciate it and they're cool about it and they're not like asking me for more than they're paying me for. But yeah, like whenever I'm on a freelance job, hopefully none of my clients are listening to this. I'm always just like trying to churn through it so that I want to do good work. I want to be someone that they come back to and that they can trust to do a good project. But I am not emotionally invested in, some random YouTube video that I'm putting an animated logo on.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I was talking to a friend of mine about that, where I was like, oh, I feel bad. I used to like put 150% in all of my professional work, and now I value my personal work more than my professional work. And I'm like, I can't give 150% anymore. I feel like I'm giving 70%, and I feel bad I'm not giving like 100. And she was just like, is your 70% good enough? I was like, yeah. It's like what other people are turning in. She's like, you're fine.
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, as long as you're doing the job, I feel like, I don't know. It's because like you have, like, not only do you do comics, but you also have a family. So you have so much going on. Like, how do you manage all of these like different aspects of your life?
Yeah. So I have 4 kids ranging in age from 1-year-old to 8 years old. And so yeah, the work-life balance is super important. And one thing that was interesting with having kids, like we had our first baby when I was still in school, and like it definitely impacts how much time you have, right? Because you're taking care of the baby and you want to be with your family. But in some ways it made me way more productive just because the stakes were higher, right? Like if I'm in the lab at school or, now in the office working on something, then I know that back home my wife is taking care of the kids. So like I better be using my time well, right? Because that's like a sacrifice that she's making to allow me to be here doing this thing. So it definitely focused me both in my creative personal work and professionally, for sure professionally, because just expenses are a lot higher when you're supporting a family. My wife stays home full time with the kids, and so that side of it, that part of it, is all on me to make sure I'm bringing home a paycheck. As far as like giving them enough time, like it's important to me to usually be keeping regular like business hours for my work day, and every now and then I'll have a crunch where I'm working on the weekends or working in the evening, but usually I'm just working 9 to 5, and I just have to be efficient enough with my time to make it work. That like if I want to work on comics, I just need to be fast enough with my commercial work to be able to get it done. And I do think like having those kinds of constraints on my time, like it makes me realize how much time I wasted when I was single, just doing nothing, just like you're just like so, or at least I was so unappreciative of free time, just casting it aside. And now it's a lot more precious. So I think having a family is it doesn't affect you in the way you think as far as having time to work on personal things.
Do you have dedicated time that you carve out during the week that you work on your comic? Like do you do like Thursdays and Tuesday nights I work on my comic, and then weekends are for the family, or like how do you balance that kind of thing for yourself?
Yeah, it'd probably be better if I did, and I don't. I just like with the Grovertoons webcomics, they're not on any kind of regular release schedule, and that's intentional, so that like when I'm working on commercial stuff, there'll be periods where I'm barely touching comics for a few weeks at a time, and then I'll get like a full week or sometimes lately even like a month to just work on comics, and that's all I'm doing until another email comes in with more commercial work. And so yeah, I'm just kind of giving all to whichever thing is the priority at any given time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because there's something like sometimes I'm like trying to figure out, like, I mean, I always have like a million to-do lists, and I try my best in the morning to to-do list with the priorities. Do you have any kind of like system that you use to, or you just kind of like what you said is just like, okay, today I'm just doing commercial work and that's the one task.
Yeah, I'm not a big like system and lists guy usually, unless I'm really behind on stuff, and then as a last resort, I'll start doing that. But yeah, I mean, what you're doing, working full time and then working on your stuff on the side, that is very hard. For a little while, I worked full time at an ad agency doing motion graphics, and I would wake up early in the morning to do stuff, and that's just it's much more difficult to do it that way. Like freelance has been way easier for me to be able to get my own things done. Like it's really hard to work on your own thing for just an hour and then shift gears into commercial work. So I admire you for being able to do it and being able to crank out your stuff. But for me, it's much easier to like go full time on commercial stuff for a week and then full time on comic stuff for a week.
Yeah, dude, that's the dream. No, it's true that it's cool that you mentioned that, because it's something that I'm like noticing too, is like I feel like I'm getting a little bit less flexible with how I can switch gears, and I'm like thinking like, oh my God, how am I gonna keep doing this? But and do you feel like going from an ad agency full time to freelance was like, did you manage to get enough clients through your full-time job that you were able to go freelance without how stressful is it? How stressful is it to be freelance?
It was stressful at first. So right after school, I freelanced for a while just because that's all I had. And then we decided we wanted to buy a house, and so I had to get a full-time job to be able to qualify for a mortgage, right? And so I worked at the ad agency for a little over a year, and I didn't like it. I think, I met some cool people there, and there were some good things about it, but overall, I didn't like it. It was way too corporate, and I really didn't like that my pay was not connected to my performance, right? And I didn't like how if I would work super hard on a deadline and do this big crunch, and then the next day didn't have anything, but I was still expected to be in the office, that was very frustrating to me, just that whole experience. So mentally, I was definitely craving going back to freelance just to have more control and to feel like the money that I got was directly connected to the work that I was doing. So I was very eager to get back to it as soon as possible. So it was just a matter of making sure we had enough money saved up that I could afford to make the jump. Because I think if you're freelancing full time, you absolutely have to have a safety net of 6 months to a year of money in the bank that you can live on. And so, the whole time I was working at that ad agency, we were just trying to live frugally enough to save up for that. And then, I was gradually building up clients on the side because I had freelanced in school. I had a few connections. And then I got a job. The one that convinced me to go ahead and pull the trigger and freelance full time again was I got a job doing graphics for a DJ called Cascade. And he was doing...
Oh, heck yeah. Wow.
Cool. Yeah, he was doing this big concert in California, and he needed looping animation for it and some graphics for it. And it was a big enough job that I wasn't going to be able to do it if I was working full time at the agency. So I was like, okay, I can take the leap. And that was a super fun job. It was really funny because I did these designs. Like I designed this octopus, and they turned it into this giant inflatable, like 20 feet high.
Wow.
And then they were like playing my animation on this huge stage in this music festival. Super exciting. And then they were going to do it again. No, I didn't go. I should have. And then so here's the thing. The next year they were going to do it again, and they were going to fly me out this time. So I could see it. And I designed a bunch of inflatables that time, but then the concert got canceled. At the last minute, there was some issue with ticket sales, and they canceled it. And then the guy that had been my point of contact got laid off, and so there's somewhere in a warehouse there's a bunch of giant inflatables that I designed that I've never actually seen. They're like next to the Ark of the Covenant or something in some warehouse, like Indiana Jones. and I got to track him down someday because there's like a giant alien and a monkey and like all this stuff that I made.
Like, can I buy these back from you?
Yeah, exactly.
I've
so
saved up 6
crazy.
months of rent to buy these. I'm spending my safety net. I've tracked you down.
My son won't get to play soccer this year, but I have this giant inflatable monkey in my living room.
He will have to practice with a rock. His foot will get strong.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So yeah,
That's funny.
that first year of freelancing after making the jump again, there were some dicey moments for sure where I was like, man, am I going to be able to pull this off? And then eventually you just get critical mass of clients where like now I'm confident that even if I don't have a job this month, a couple months from now, something's coming down the pipe. I have enough connections out there. And then if the runway ever gets short enough, if the bank account ever gets low enough, then that's my signal to, okay, it's time to get another job until I can build it back up. So, and the older you get, the harder it is to go back to it, I think. Just
to the job?
Yeah. Well, both. But I mean, like I think if I was working full time now and was trying to make the jump to freelance, it would be so much harder because my expenses are so much higher than they were 10 years ago, right? So I think if people are interested in working for themselves and doing it independently, like the sooner you can do it, the better.
That is such good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. In the midst of all this, you've locked down a book deal. Can you talk about how that happened? Did they find you? Did you pitch? Did you? How does? I'm sure this happens differently for different people. I'm curious.
Yeah. So before I started working on Deeply Dave, I had done a bunch of short comics in college, and I knew I wanted to do a full-length graphic novel, but was very intimidated by the scope of doing something that was, the longest thing I had done to that point was 40 pages, and a graphic novel is usually like 240 pages. And so I put together a pitch. I was hoping that somebody would pay me to do it. And I shopped it around or sent it around to some publishers and some agents. I got one phone call with an agent because of a friend connection. And it was super discouraging because she was like a prominent literary agent in the middle grade graphic novel space. And she just did not get what I was trying to do. And I was like, man, maybe the literary world isn't where I'm going to fit in. Maybe I need to stick with online stuff. But either way, I want to make this comic, so I'm gonna make it. So I spent a few years making Deeply Dave, and I kind of had this hope that if I finished a big project like that, then at the end, then the heavens were gonna open and all my dreams would come true, and I just had to like finish this big thing. So then when I finished it, there was a little bit of a letdown where I was like, oh well, that didn't happen. Okay, well, on to the next thing. While I was working on it, or right before I had started putting out Deeply Dave episodes, was when I would quit social media. So I knew I was taking kind of a risk there. And it was like, all right, I guess I'm just in this for the long game. But a few months after finishing Deeply Dave, I started sending it around to people. And this time, like what I was really trying to gauge, I was hoping for a publishing deal, but I was really just trying to gauge, like, does the stuff I'm making have a place in publishing? Or like I had thought earlier, do I just need to stick to online stuff? And so I got a meeting with someone who runs a mid-size kind of indie comics publisher, set up a phone call with him. And really, I just wanted to pick his brain. And he offered me a publishing deal in that call. I was like, holy crap, like this is amazing. I had never gotten that kind of validation from anyone in the publishing world before. Super exciting. And, the contract he offered me, it wasn't bad, but it did ask for TV and film rights for the comic in addition to the publishing rights. And like I would get a piece of it, but they would control those rights. Yeah. And so I was asking people about that, like, should I do this or not? And I had a friend who was like, you really need an agent to help you negotiate that. Because you're going to want to hang on to those rights, or at least like have that worded differently than the way it is in that contract. And so, I didn't really want to go through the process of querying agents again, because that's an exhausting process and kind of soul crushing to send stuff out and just not hear back. But now I had a soft offer on the table. And so I actually heard back from agents this time. And I found an agent who signed with me, and he shopped it around wider to bigger publishers, and we ended up getting a deal. We ended up getting 2 more offers, and one of them was with Macmillan, their imprint, which is called Henry Holt. So yeah, it was kind of a crazy process. It was crazy to go from feeling like nobody cared what I was working on to then having multiple offers from these publishers. And that was instructive to realize that, like, if you can get validation from somebody, just like one person who's in that world, then it's like blood in the water. And all of a sudden other people are interested because they know it's been vetted on some level.
There's that, and there's also this thing where it's like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I've been trying to pitch shows like TV shows. It's sort of, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar on a lot of levels.
Mhm.
And I feel there was a moment I was starting to feel crazy because I was like, I'm trying to write this all out and make this so people understand what I'm trying to do, but it always felt like nobody really understood what I was trying to do.
Mhm.
And then you just feel like you're an insane person, and then you make the thing, and then people are like, well, I get it now. And it's like, well, yeah, because the
Yes.
thing is there, but there's like, I feel like maybe there's a little like, because how would you describe the way you pitched deeply, Dave? Like, how did you kind of, like, how many pages, how much drawing, how many pages of comics did you have in there? Like, what's a little bit of the rundown of that pitch?
I mean, I think I pitched it pretty similar to what it ended up being, where I said it'll be around 200 pages. It's going to be a sci-fi, graphic novel. One thing that got me hung up a little bit is on what audience to say it's for, because I think of my work, like I don't have a really specific audience in mind. I'm trying to make stuff that I think is cool, and then I am trying to make it accessible to kids. I'm not gearing it explicitly towards kids, but I want kids to be able to enjoy it as well. And that's tricky with any kind of publisher or studio because they want to have like an exact age range of who it's for. And my style of drawing, I think in the American marketplace at least, is always going to be geared towards kids. And older audiences are going to be considered a bonus. But that's not necessarily how I'm thinking about it when I'm making it. So I do think that was a hang up a little bit when I was first pitching it, where I was like, yeah, maybe it's like young adult, but like agents and publishers would see this as being middle grade, meaning for like ages 8 to 12. And that's, now that I have the book deal and they're publishing it, that's the market that they're going to be aiming it towards. And I didn't have to cut out any content for them to make it that way. Like this comic that I made thinking it was, for teenagers or college students who like cartoons, like they're like, oh yeah, this is fine for 8 to 12-year-olds. Right. And I see that all the time where cartoons that I like I love Adventure Time and a lot of Cartoon Network stuff. And like I'm kind of nervous about showing that stuff to my kids because I'm like, this is pretty weird, deep stuff. But the studios see it as being marketable towards that audience. So it's kind of a tricky thing to navigate.
It doesn't curse. It's one of those things where, because they're smart, they figure out how to replace the feeling of someone cursing with a made up word that isn't a curse. And so it makes you feel like you're looking like at a parallel universe, at something that like it could be for adult, someone older than you, and it makes you, I don't know, I feel like that makes you feel special, and it also feels like it's not talking down to you when you're watching.
It depends on the season too. I feel like Adventure Time, the first seasons are pretty like all ages, but then you get to the later seasons and like the characters kind of grow up with the audience, so you have like, I wouldn't have a child binge watch Adventure Time. I would maybe show them maybe season 1,
right?
But then because then it gets like very like existential and stuff, and that's where like and it's funny because I remember I got those Scott Pilgrim books for my sister Clem, our editor, when she was maybe Clem will Clem, you can cut and correct me on this. You can self-insert in this episode.
Little voice of God jumping in.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think I got her the books around age 14, but Scott Pilgrim is all about like a relationship. I think when you're 14, you're just kind of like, I'm not interested in this. Let's live. And it's like it kind of came later, so it's kind of like the themes can be very. It's fun because of the style. The drawings are so cute. So I was like, oh well, I can, it's so funny how like audience are. Yeah, what would you like? Well, I guess you have, so you said you have a kid who's like 8 years old. Like, what kind of cartoons would you like watch with them?
Let's see, what is he watching these days? I mean, he's watching a lot of like PBS or
Mhm.
like we just started watching the Star Wars movies with him.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty fun to like vicariously experience that again through an 8-year-old. Though they all know the spoilers already. Like
Yeah.
kids just are born knowing that Darth Vader is Luke's father now. There's so much cultural osmosis there.
It is funny though that like we might be nervous about some kids watching Adventure Time because of the things it'll make them think about, but Star Wars gets away with like lasers and shooting stuff all the time, but because like they get shot and sparks fly off instead of blood, it's like okay,
Yeah.
like this is good, this is for kids. I don't know, it is funny.
The characters in Star Wars have such a disregard for human life. They are so
right,
casual.
yeah.
They are so casual about murdering stormtroopers and just like don't even bat an eye, just like level this entire platoon.
Basically, if a character has a helmet on, fuck them. Like if a
Yeah.
character has a helmet
Yeah.
on, blast that sucker.
Yeah, totally. No, you're absolutely right. And it's just because like especially like episode 4, right? It's got such this light campy vibe to it.
Yeah.
That it's not disturbing.
Sure.
Whereas there are like episodes of like season 7 Adventure Time that are like haunting to me as an adult just because of the tone and
It's so interesting you bring that up because when we were trying to adapt Wings of Fire into a animated show, the first book of Wings of Fire has some themes that are pretty deep and dark without too many spoilers. I think they're really fun books, but like the dragons get captured and then they're made to battle in a what's it called, like
Battle
as
Royale?
gladiators.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
basically they're like they're gladiators and like
Hunger
and
Games
because
with
they can't
dragons.
yeah, kind of. And then like one of the dragons is made to battle a dragon from her tribe. And it's kind of like she has to make this decision of like, well, it's me or him, and I'm supposed to like be one of like the people who carry out the prophecy, the blah blah blah, and like I have a better chance to save
Stuff
the
we all
world than
relate to.
he does. And it's kind of like, and it's funny because like the books are like kids who are in middle school love the books. Like they love that these kind of like very like deep, angsty. But when we were like trying to adapt it in a cartoon, we were like, oh, this is so hard. How would you like go about this?
It's dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you
It's
actually
dark.
get to like actually
Yeah, because when you see it, yeah, when you see it on the screen, right? And then, but then, so we were like trying to look at like references and stuff and like how other movies or how other shows do it, and it's all about tone. Because like I was reading the pilot of Buffy, and Buffy has like a line in the first pilot where she like one of the characters is like, oh, yeah, we found a dead body in our lockers. Ugh, gross.
Uh-huh.
That sucks.
It's like okay,
But
now
it
we
works.
understand what tone we're feeling. It doesn't matter when ghouls kill people in the show. Like it's chill.
Like
We're not
it doesn't
gonna
impact
freak
them
out.
emotionally in the same way. It's like kind of like scary and gross, but it's like they're not, they're not having nightmares.
Yeah, it's more like ew, dead bodies, gross, but not like oh my god, you killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is funny. When I was first working on the Hamburglar comic, I was explaining it to my wife before I started drawing it, and I'm like, yeah, so he's gonna go to hell because he's been eating all the burger people, and they're like sentient people, and so he's been like kidnapping them and murdering them and eating them, and so now he's in hell with all of their souls, and he's got to like escape. He has to like kill the devil and escape.
Mhm.
And she was like, this is so dark. Like,
Yeah.
that sounds so heavy. And then the actual comic, I think it's not that way at all. Like it's pretty goofy
Yeah.
and light, and yeah. So there's different ways to handle your subject matter.
Like tone, and I think that's something that's so hard to pitch, like pitching the
Yeah,
tone.
totally.
Ah, it's so tough because sometimes you're trying to explain a thing and people like receive it as this completely different idea because you're not like carrying the tone across correctly. It's that what yeah, like what you were saying, like like, oh, he's in hell because he ate like sentient burgers.
Yeah, yeah, and
Well, it's funny because I like he also has been stealing his whole life. like you
Yeah.
like technically I don't think you need to have them be sentient people and have them it be murder. Like
hey,
he's also
I didn't make this
stealing the
up.
whole
This is in the
time.
commercials. They're already like that. They're cute and happy, and he's kidnapping them.
There's another thing too that I've realized is like when you want to do, okay, this is something that's, it sounds so like easy. Like when I'm going to say it, it's going to sound just so like, duh, of course. But like I was trying to, like, me and my creative partner, Sam, we were trying to do a vigilante type character who like part of her job is to like kill the bad guys. And, you know, you're like, kill the bad guys. Yeah. But then it's like, how do you like deal with death? Like who can die and who cannot? And I feel like when you have a character who's going to kill another like character, that other character has to have done like something at least as bad, like more bad kind of thing, or else it's like you can't get
how many
behind the
robberies
character.
equal a murder? What's the
Yeah.
sin math there? It has to be at least
do
as
you-
bad. What's the sin math when you add it up? I got you.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we were talking about too, about pitching, that like ultimately you just have to make the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
at least for me with getting this book deal, like I had to put in the work to just do it. And there was some artist on a podcast who was saying like nobody's going to pay you to do something you've never done before, right? Like that's just bad business. So if you want to get paid to do something, you just have to do it, right?
Yeah,
Again, sounds very obvious, but it's not something like, I think as a student, it's easy to think like I know that I have this vision, and I know I have this latent talent within me, and so somebody should be paying me to do it. But really, you just gotta put it in yourself.
I mean, it can also be the difference in between somebody picking up your story where, you know, like if, for instance, if you were just pitching a Bible where you're explaining what could happen, and it's like fill in the gaps with your mind, which is how a lot of pitches go. Like, it could mean the difference in between them picking it up and then steering it in whatever way they want to, because they, you know, are now your creative partner and are developing it with you, versus you finding somebody who's going to pick it up and be like, we want this exact story for how it is with your voice, because that's what makes it good, and we're going to make it. And I think while those are rare, I think that those can happen.
Yeah, totally. And that's the preferred scenario for sure.
Yeah.
It's just hard to actually finish stuff, right?
It is so hard.
That's like that's like most of the battle, I think, actually. Yeah, it's like 90% is like finishing the thing, and then 10% is like getting sweaty in front of some people who have some power, like trying to convince them to like it, you know?
This is like that ties really well into a question from our patron Puzzle Glum, who asked, "What's the hardest part of making webcomics?"
Yeah, I think sending it out into the void and feeling like nobody cares.
Oh yeah!
You're
wow.
like, there's no likes on this. Why? It's 'cause you
Oh yeah,
don't have social media. Oh no,
because I burned it all down. Yeah, yeah. You know, that is a self-inflicted problem for sure. That like, yeah, with social media, you can watch those likes come in, you watch the comments come in. Now I send stuff out. I'll send out an email list, and sometimes it feels like, man, like, did anybody even see this? And then when I do get an email, every now and then I'll get an email from someone who's like, hey, I loved this, good job. And that's like a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean, just like, oh, thank you.
Some old-fashioned, like, Paul Revere, like, horseman runs up with a old postage letter sealed in wax, and it's like one of your fans from, like, who wrote you 3 years ago. It's like, hey, I like your dearest Michael. I write you hoping that you are well. I was on YouTube looking at you. You know, I was on your website, gazing upon your your moving pictures, and I wanted to tell you that I hate it, and it insulted me. It's like still like a shitty YouTube comment.
Yeah.
It reminded me of art. It reminded me of Adventure Time. CalArt style sucks. Whatever. Like,
yeah. And then I have to like write a letter back. Yeah. Yeah. And the Paul Revere guy, he's like, don't read the letters. You're not supposed to read them.
Don't read the letters, burn the letters.
Yeah. It's all trolls sending letters.
I've always wondered because I used to be, I'm still a big fan of Adam and His Package, which is like a very silly punk band by this like chemistry teacher, and it was all kind of like on his website and stuff. And then sometimes I would go on his guest book to kind of see what he would write, because that's where he would like put the tours and everything. You said like, yeah, I get a lot of hate mail. You guys can like hate on me like all different kind of ways if you want, but I'm not gonna like reply to you. And I was like, that's so funny that people would. I guess he was putting out his music before social media, so people would actually take the time to like type out these like hate mail.
Yeah. Can you imagine being so mad at somebody's music that you write a letter about it?
Yeah.
With like a beginning, middle, and end, and you put postage on it. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So funny. I think some of it had like I don't know. It's not really hot takes, but he would just kind of like comment on like some pop culture stuff, I guess.
Yeah, he was rubbing people the wrong way.
Yeah.
So back to the question, like that's definitely a difficult part of webcomics. I don't know. What else is hard about webcomics? V, you're making some webcomics. Because with your Rodney comic, is that on a regular schedule, or is that just whenever you get to it?
I try to have it. I really wanted to have it on a regular schedule, but the things like depending on what I have to do, because I feel like the amount of work that is on my plate is very like ebb and flow, and sometimes I'm like, nice, I just have my regular job and I can do Rodney on top. It's not a problem, but
yeah.
Right now I have I'm juggling so many things. I'm like, I just have to put it on hold because I can't do it all. It's impossible. Like, I just don't have enough brain space for it. I would say what's the hardest part is like sitting down and writing, because it's like that's the moment when you're like, because when you have all the ideas and I'm so excited to draw the scene, or I'm so excited to get to that part, and then like when you actually do get to that part, it's so fun. You don't have to do any work because it's just like, haha, that's everything I wanted to do. But then you have like moments in between, or you have like arcs. You're like, I know I have to tie up this loose end, but that's because of my way of working, where I'm setting up a bunch of like random stuff, and then I'm like, I'll figure it out later, and then it's like later, and I'm like, oh, how do I make this work? But like a part of me, this is me trying to like to make myself feel better, I guess. But like, if I don't know, if when I'm writing it, I don't know how it's gonna end, and I surprise myself with my ideas, then there's no way my audience will figure out what I'm gonna come up with. So I think
that's interesting.
Fun, you know what I mean? But I do. But then you have to kind of like walk that rope of like when you do get that idea, you do have to kind of like set it up enough so it's not a complete like left turn, because you don't want people to be like, well, suspension of disbelief over, because it can turn your audience off as well. So you want to be like mindful. But I do feel like when you don't have the whole thing figured out at the beginning and you figure it out as you go, then it's more fun for the reader. But it's really hard.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Our patron Claire _the Rose is asking, what are your graphic novel or webtoon inspirations?
So my original inspiration for getting into comics and art was definitely newspaper comic strips. Like, it was a big part of my daily routine to get up as a kid, go out to the driveway and get the newspaper and bring it in and read the comics. And in fact, it was such a part of my routine. I did it in my sleep once.
Oh, you sleepwalk?
As a kid, I would sleepwalk.
Just covered in comics.
Wow.
And so it's like 10 p.m. and my dad hears the front door open and close and thinks that somebody just walked into our house. And so he goes out to the living room, like ready to fight a burglar. And I come back in. He's like, "What are you doing?" like, I'm getting the paper, like clearly still asleep. So, that tells you something about what kind of kid I was, I guess.
What kind of comics from the paper did you like?
It was all the Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes.
Sure.
I mean, I guess Calvin and Hobbes wasn't in the paper at that time, but yeah, Zits, Baby Blues, all of them,
Yeah.
even the not funny ones, I'd read them. And then as I got older, that's when I started getting interested in animation. The big gateway that I remember for getting into animation was the director's commentary on the Incredibles DVD, where Brad Bird has his little rant about the animation genre versus the animation medium. And I remember that blowing my mind. So these are like early inspirations, right? And then, also like a big one for how I approach webcomics right now was Homestar Runner.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Because definitely the humor and the style and all that, sure, but also the way that they created like this insular world. And Sean, you came from that world of the Flash cartoons, right?
My nickname in school was Pom Pom because I was chubby.
Hey, that's a compliment because Pom Pom rocks.
No, Pom Pom rules.
He's the coolest guy. Yeah. And HomestarRunner.com was unique for that era because that was the era of like terrible pop-up ads and banner ads plastered over everything, right?
They were like their own channel with multiple little stations or comics or cartoons or whatever all on that, their website and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They were creating this little world for you to come be a part of, and they even talk about in interviews how like they were resistant to the idea of at the end of a strong bad email saying buy a t-shirt. Like they didn't even want to be overt with their own advertising within the website. Like they were very intentional with creating this kind of pure experience when you'd use the website. And so I thought about that a ton when I was making the Grovertoons website. Like how can I make that same thing? And that contributed to my decision to leave social media and try to just cultivate my own corner of the internet to be kind of like that. So if any of you guys out there know Matt and Mike Chapman, because I know they work in animation these days, I've been dying to talk to them since I was 12 years old. So if anyone's listening, shoot me an email.
We want to talk to them too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll share
Just
it.
email everybody.
Yeah. We'll do another episode. Get me back on here with the Brothers Chaps.
Yeah, that is so cool. We have a couple questions from Instagram. Scott Pilgrim Fan 2006 is asking, what is your it's a funny question. I'm gonna ask, what's the favorite comic you've made so far? And can you give advice for aspiring comic artists?
Cool. Yeah, I'm really proud of Deeply Dave because it's a complete story and there is an arc to it. And that was the first time I've done something on that scale. And then also my most recent one with the Hamburglar comic, that was just really fun to like see how far I could push that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy about that too. And I got kind of excited about the mixed media element with that one, like pulling in the 3D stuff, because I learned Maya in school and I always was like beating my head against it. Like it was such a struggle to learn it. And then the 3D platform I used for this is a free in-browser platform called Womp. Have you guys heard of Womp?
Oh,
Wait.
You should try it. You should try out Womp. It's like playing with Play-Doh is how it feels. Like it's a much more, there's an immediacy to it that no 3D program I've ever used has, and it renders in browser in real time.
Wow.
It's very cool. And and I don't know if they're going to move to like a subscription model or something. I think they already have some paid aspects to it, but for now the main thing is free and it's just modeling and rendering, and they don't have an animation timeline on there yet. And so when I was doing the animated 3D stuff on Hamburglar, I was doing it like stop motion style, where I would move the 3D model and then render it and then move it and hit render it again.
I made a cartoon like that with Sculptress, which was also a free ZBrush thing, where you photograph each little bit and you move the mouth, and it's just like if you fuck it up, then you have to just
Then you're toast.
literally do it again. Yeah,
You're done. Yeah. It's an insane way to do 3D animation, but I actually really liked the limitations that it put on me. I don't know. There was something kind of fun and exciting about that. I hope they do get a timeline on there eventually, to be able to tween stuff. But yeah, like it was a different way of thinking about 3D, because I think when I was in school, we were all just trying to make stuff look like Pixar. And I like now there's this, new wave of 3D artists like Julian Glander and Jaron Braxton and these guys that are doing just bizarro, like a much more punk approach to 3D. And I think if I had seen that when I was in school, I would have been way more excited about working on 3D stuff instead of just trying to polish everything to death. Like making intentionally ugly 3D models, like that didn't even occur to me when I was a student.
I think there's something that's so interesting with 3D because there's the side of it that's kind of like glitchy, and you can kind of play with themes of like not just technology but also like glitches or like moments of in life where like a break in sanity, you know what I mean, like stuff like that. I think is really interesting. Yeah, like ugly 3D is so like interesting, and I think it's kind of in right now. I think there's like
it's having
when
a
you
moment.
look at YouTube, like with like the back rooms and with all the like
Oh,
liminal
yeah.
spaces and all that kind of stuff. Like even FNAF is a little bit in that ugly 3D kind of realm.
Yeah. It's exciting.
There's...
It's exciting to see that, just people interpreting, because it's a relatively new medium compared to anything else we've got. So back to the second part of that question, maybe my advice for young artists would be, don't be afraid to make ugly stuff. Like, I think about that with 2D animation as well. And I think when I learned the 12 principles of animation for a while, that kind of got in the way of me making animation, because I felt like everything had to settle perfectly, and that I had to follow all those rules. And it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, I can just make like a janky like 3-frame loop and it's fine. Like it gets the idea across, and it's maybe even better in some ways. So it's tough. We talked about this earlier too. It's tough as a student when you're learning the rules to have the confidence to fly in the face of those rules.
Yeah, but I think it's also hard because it's like, there's you want to know the rules enough before you break them, because I feel like sometimes you're too eager to break them and then it doesn't like really land, or it doesn't really make any sense because it's like you broke them too early without really understanding how to break them, kind of. That makes sense. Yeah. But I do think this is good advice, because I do feel like there's a moment when rules just become like a burden and they just slow you down, and you just have to. There's a moment you just want to make stuff, have fun.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, learning craft versus, thinking about the end product more, or what you were saying, V, about composition in your boards instead of getting hung up on perspective.
Yeah. From YouTube, we have 3 questions from our YouTube listeners. From @ppwomyanmar 7233. What are the pros and cons of using a webcomic hosting website in comparison to having your own website?
Yeah, good question. You can probably speak to this one, V, since you're using Webtoon, right? Like, I think it's a lot of the same pros and cons as using social media.
Yeah.
Where you're dependent on a corporation and, the limitations that they have. Whereas on my own website, I can do the looping animation and the music, and can experiment in a different way, can kind of cultivate the experience in a different way. But also, nobody sees it when I put it out there. So, whereas on Webtoon, you potentially, not necessarily, but you potentially have a built-in audience there, depending on how much they promote it on their end. It's I think the built-in audience on Webtoon can be overhyped a little bit. I definitely experimented with putting stuff on Webtoon and didn't get a lot of traction. There's a very specific type of comic that does well on Webtoon and Tapas, right? I don't know.
I think overall, Webtoons is just like, I don't think it's so much that there's a specific type, because I feel like obviously like romance is very big on Webtoons and Tapas, but like,
that's what I was referring to. But there's other stuff on there.
there's other stuff, but it's also like like the competition is super fierce because there's so much of it. So if you're gonna
Yeah.
go on this website and do a romance comic, you're like the competition is really, really high.
Yeah.
I would say from my experience, you don't really get new eyes on webtoons unless you have a very long running comic and you bring a lot of your fans over to webtoons, because the ranking system, I just now got to a spot with Rodney where I am starting to get new followers from webtoons, but it's extremely recent. It's just
Interesting.
like from the current, like, because I've been doing Rodney for almost 3 years now, so it's only 3 years in the making of the comic that now I'm starting to get a tiny little bit of like the webtoon audience. But that's because the way it works is with the amount of likes. So if you can go into Canvas and sort it through genre, and then you can, so if you go in the horror subcategory and sort it by popularity, now I'm like on the 4th page. But then I would need to have even more, and I could get there because I brought over a lot of my followers from Instagram, from TikTok, from all of the other social media. So it's like you have to do so much work, so like to bring your readership over so that you rise through the ranks, and then eventually you get like high enough that you can get the new followers from there. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So just like with any platform, you have to play by their rules, right? And you have to kind of learn what the rules are and figure out if you can maximize your potential on that platform and decide if it's worth it or not for you, right? Like, because for a lot of people, like, you know, I've been talking about how I got off of social media. For a lot of people, it works great and they have an amazing experience and they connect with people and you know, are putting good stuff out into the world. I think what's tough is when people feel like when they're not having a positive experience on those platforms, but they feel like they have to use them in order to find success. And I hope to challenge that narrative a little bit and say, you don't have to be on those platforms if you don't want to be.
Yeah. That's really cool. Now, what's really cool is that you're able to make it work financially without being on social media, which kind of leads into our next question from @SpongeBob38. Are webcomics a financially viable path, or is it best to look at them only as a portfolio piece in order to get work?
Yeah. Yes. Tell that person to stay tuned. I'll let them know in 10 years.
It sounds like a little bit of a neither answer, right? Because you're also doing them for fun too. It's what you want to be doing, and it's cool if it makes money at some point. But you're not using them as a portfolio piece, really, are you?
No, I'm not using them as a stepping stone. Like, I think the project justifies itself. So, yeah, and I am finding ways to monetize them through publishing, right? Because I've got this publishing deal. I'm hoping to monetize them further with with merchandise and with other things. But I also just want to make something for the sake of it as well. Like it's so creatively liberating to focus less on what's going to be the most popular thing and instead think like what is the coolest thing that I can imagine, and can I get that out into the world? Because definitely, like, doing the animation and the music, like doing these extra elements on the webcomic, there isn't a direct way to monetize that aspect of it, because that's not going to show up in the print version, which is how I'm currently making money from it. So I don't know. Yeah, I think webcomics are worth making just for the sake of making them, and I hope that it is financially viable. And I think things are shifting in the internet, right? Like we've had this decade of everything is social media, and people are getting burnt out on that and tired of that. We have the vertical scroll platforms like Webtoon becoming popular, so people are becoming more familiar with that format. So something I'm thinking about a lot is, instead of being on the back end of the last wave, how do I get on the front end of the next wave?
And my question for you is, do you, because you're doing a vertical scrolling format, do you view yourself as making very long TikToks? Very tall TikToks?
Yes, that's all. This is where I announce my new TikTok channel that I need everybody to follow and subscribe. I don't even know what words they use. Do you say like and subscribe like you do on YouTube? Yeah, that's funny.
That's so funny. Oh man. Yeah. Cracking this like TikTok is so weird. It's so weird. It's like I don't know. I think it has this algorithm of like kind of like slots machine where like eventually
Mm.
at some point it will like pick one of your content and make it go viral. And you're like, ooh, I could get this all the time. And then it's like,
Uh-huh.
but no, it's like the slots. They're like they're doing that on purpose, so you keep posting. It's kind of crazy.
Like I'm
Ah,
So
yeah.
I'm I'm not a very religious person, but I feel like TikTok feels like Satan. Like I feel like there's something about TikTok in that like it's almost like you're selling your soul to like that and hoping that just like almost like it's like this gambling thing where you're like throwing little segments of your soul out into the universe and you found this platform that like you could either get 1 million views or nothing and like I don't know, there's like something about it that feels different than any other social media platform
I
that I've
I
ever seen.
I do agree that like TikTok has made Instagram change in a way that is absolutely soul crushing because now everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. Like
Reels and
that
stuff.
same algorithm,
Yeah.
the reels and the like scrolling, like that thing where your feed is you just keep scrolling up and it's all like short videos and they all work the same. YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. And man, it just sucks because it's like I don't know. For me, that's the thing that I'm kind of trying to I'm like kind of grappling with right now because Instagram was really, really good for artists last year. And this year, it sucks. Like it's really bad. It's really hard to get views. A lot of people are complaining about it. Like last year, it was all about being a gold star student. It was like you show up every day, you post good content, and eventually the algorithm has your back. But
Hmm.
this year, no, not anymore. It's like you have to post reels all the time, and
Like,
it's like
give me a hall
when
pass.
you're
I
in
have to pee.
a
I'm a
yeah, and
good
it's this thing
student.
where yeah, it's hard because you're like, well, am I gonna dance for it? Like, what am I gonna do now? Am I gonna meme on the trending sounds? Like, ah man, and then you're like, what a ugh.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Michael's
it's
listening
definitely.
to this like
He's like,
you
I was
fools.
right,
He's
I was
just
right all
yeah, just
along.
listening to like just this little like bitter little and he's like
The smug face.
Yeah, that's
No, but I love it though. I mean, I think we is important to talk about all aspects of it. It's
yeah.
important to be, because it's you've got to be real about these things, right? It's like sometimes it puts like some wins in your sales, and then sometimes it's like, yeah, it's no, it's not, it's not your friend. So yeah, and it's hard to like reckon with it, like I think emotionally in terms of like, okay, how much energy am I gonna pour into this, right? Like how far am I willing to go to get some views, right? So
yeah.
yeah, it's just a
Yep.
question mark at the end. It's like yeah, it really feels like playing the slots at this point. Like I think that's the hardest thing to kind of reckon with. It's like I'm the kind of person like psychologically where I'm like, if I just work hard and I show up every day, eventually it's gonna work. And now the algorithm does not work this way anymore. So
Yeah,
it's
but
very
because
defeating.
really I think that legitimately you can make the best piece you've ever made and
Yes.
it could be
Gets no
just
views.
that day it just doesn't get
Yes.
any views and then you're
Mm-hmm.
taking from that you need to go in another direction but it's like
Mm-hmm.
following a compass that is just going in
Yes.
circles and you're like oh that's north, oh this is north, oh that's north.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, I think for artists right now, I really hope that artists aren't taking from social media clues as to where to take their art because social media is broken right now. And I don't think like if you fall into that spiral, it's really bad for like psychologically, it's gonna be really bad. And so it's kind of oh man, I had a thought and I just lost it. No, because I was watching the video from like the creator of Patreon who's kind of talking about that, and then you start kind of like compromising so much because you start doing content that is more like marketing rather than actual art. And that's not what you want to do as an artist. You don't want to be marketing all the time. You want to be able to just make the art.
Yeah. One thing I've been trying to do with my comics is, because I do think marketing is an important part of it, even with the approach that I'm taking right now. And so I'm trying to have periods of time where I'm only in creation mode and then periods of time where I'm in marketing mode. Because I think, I don't know, like in a studio, it's different departments, right? You've got the people making the thing and you got the people selling the thing. And I think in your own practice, then you can kind of bifurcate things a little bit and be like, okay, right now I'm trying to make the coolest thing that I can imagine. And then when I'm done, then I need to start thinking about how do I sell this thing? And so doing things at a slower pace has helped me do that, where like I finished this Hamburglar comic and then I started thinking like, okay, who are some people I can reach out to? I did that live event at the comic book shop. V, I sent you an email and you graciously invited me on this podcast. I wrote a press release for the first time.
Ooh.
Have you guys ever written a press release before?
I've never done that. How did you go about it?
Yeah, I guess it wasn't the first time, but I just like looked up a bunch of press releases, right? And tried to write about the comic in a way that it would be easy for some online magazine to do a story or a review on it. And I like searched through the internet for a bunch of email addresses and I blasted it out to all of them. And I got one write-up out of it. I got one review in a...
Hey, that's one. That's better than
a blog.
nothing.
Yeah, totally. So it was a victory. But I still have lots to learn with that. So I think there are alternate marketing approaches out there, and I'm trying to be creative with how I'm approaching it. One thing I'd love to do someday is have a billboard. Just go totally old school.
That would be sick.
I actually looked that up because how did I don't know. I listen to the weirdest stuff sometimes. But apparently owning a billboard, I was just talking about random business crazy ideas with my partner. I was just like, what if we bought a billboard? Like, how much money could we
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and it's actually like depending on the billboard, you could rent out that billboard space for like so
Dude,
much
let's
money.
get one in like Montana and get a whole bunch of new like cowboy fans, like just like
Dude,
straight cowboys. Like that listen to our podcast.
Wouldn't it be so funny though if we actually did buy? Because I looked it up, and some billboards are in like the middle of like buttfuck nowhere. Like you can get it you can buy it. You can literally buy it for like $5,000. And then you can just put whatever you want on it all the time. It's just, and then you could just rent it out to your comics friends. It's like, hey, if you pay me $100, I'll put up your comics on the billboard.
Oh man, that's pretty fun. And then you gotta have a live stream of the billboard so that people can see it.
So that you can see someone graffitiing it late at night, and you're like,
yeah.
Like I can't stop you.
It's so funny. I know like Youth in Decline got a billboard for one of their newer zines by Helen Jo. Helen Jo had a new comic with Youth in Decline, and they put her art on the billboard, which was really cool.
Rules. I like Helen Jo a lot. I have some art in the house.
But I don't know. I saw the billboard and it's so tiny, and it was like in the top of a building in like Echo Park or something, so you don't really see it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Probably billboards don't really work, right? Like unless you're doing a major campaign where you're trying to get everywhere, right? And you're putting serious money, and then it's not so much about someone like looking at the billboard and then going to your website. It's more about just trying to seem omnipresent as a brand or as a project.
I do think though, I don't know, billboards are funny because they're like so big and people know it's a lot of money to put something on the billboard. So if you put up something on the billboard that's kind of crazy, people are going to be like, what the
that's interesting. So it gives you some validity because it's like, oh, it must be a legit thing if it's there.
Right?
Yeah.
All
right, V, if you get that billboard out in Montana, the first $100 is mine. I'll PayPal you right now $100.
Let's do it. That would be like a viral sensation eventually. You know what? Let's do it. That's gonna be a dream of mine. Like I'm gonna put this on my to-do list. 2024, buy a billboard. Just put indie comics ads on it. Heck yeah, I'm into it. That's so funny. But then how'd you put it out there. Oh, I would have to figure out like, because you would have to like hire a company to like put the art up there and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Or
and then
else,
you have to
or
make
else once a month you're flying out to Montana to go like glue.
yeah. And then you would have like and if you make it like really like edgy, I don't know, you have to like kind of like figure out what the vibe is like in that town.
Yeah, so it doesn't get
And then-
burned down.
But maybe you want it to get burned down. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right. You do.
That's part
You
of a-
absolutely want it to get burned down. That is the
Right?
best case scenario, is that you're live streaming your billboard in Montana getting burned down, and then you're famous.
Well, y'all, we cracked it. We cracked it how to go viral in real life, and then you go viral online. So
Yeah.
if you
The only thing that I could think of is that, like, if you're trying to sell your comic through that billboard, I could imagine people going, "Oh, they have billboard kind of money. I don't need to buy that. They don't have money. They have billboard money. They're buying billboards.
Yeah, so I can just pirate this.
Yeah, I'll just pirate it.
I do wonder though. Okay, here's another idea, because there's something that it's on Mike Rianda episode. I think he talks about how when he's pitching to studios, sometimes he wants to kind of like have them envision how big it could be. So I think he photoshopped promo art for one of the movies he was pitching into Times Square, and I wonder
Wow.
if you do enough billboard photoshopping, but you don't take the famous billboards. You don't do Times Square because that's too obvious. If you
Mhm.
take enough innocuous, in the middle of nowhere, different billboards, and you photoshop advertising in there, would I?
And then where are you putting these pictures of photoshopped billboards? You're gonna need to get an actual billboard to put these
No.
pictures of photoshopped billboards on, so that people even see.
No, you want this stuff to feel so rebellious and punk rock that it's confusing. You want to put
Yes.
you want to put it as graffiti on the side of a train. You want to have
Yeah.
like
You
a
make
broken
stickers
CD
out of
on the
it?
grounds that it has the logo on it. You have stickers like on,
Yeah,
you know,
in the
like
bathroom of a club
Mhm.
with
in the bathroom of a
Photoshop
club.
billboard.
Yeah, and there's like there's like a condom wrapper in the picture. Like there's all sorts of like very confusing, rebellious things that you could do to make them
You make
think
it-
that it's really cool.
Yeah.
And an ARG, like what is it, like a, you know, like this things where like people, like it's like a scavenger hunt in real life, and you have clues.
Yeah.
Geocaching. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
No, it's a good idea.
big brain moment here.
Do
Okay.
you get creative block, and what do you do to solve your creative block? What do you do when you're coming up empty and you need to be a free flowing faucet of inspiration?
Yeah. I do a lot of the things that other people do that you guys have talked about on this podcast. Go for a walk. V, you've talked about sleeping, and that works way better than you'd think it would work. When I'm working on a story problem, to think about it before bed, and then in the morning it just flows so much easier. I've even had that work. I was trying to remember somebody's name once, and I just could not remember it. It was a unique name, and so I very intentionally thought to myself, like, all right, brain, you're going to work on this while I'm sleeping. You're going to need to figure this out, and then tomorrow morning I expect to have this name. And sure enough, I woke up in the morning and my subconscious is just like holding out a platter, like, here's the name. Here it is.
That's so crazy. I love this shit. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Giving your sleep self homework is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, what
That's,
else are you doing? Otherwise, you're just drudging up like childhood embarrassments and like flashing that across my subconscious while I'm trying to rest, you know? So you might as well be productive. But yeah, what else do I do? Like we've talked about, I'm a religious person, so sometimes I pray when I'm experiencing creative block. And I think even if you're not a religious person, it is a useful way to think about creativity, to think like, I am not creating anything out of a vacuum. I am just a vessel, right? And kind of asking a higher power for help is a way to externalize that mindset of like I just, you know, the pressure isn't all on me to figure this out. I'm asking the universe or asking God for for help to kind of flow through me and come up with something.
How, like, I'm actually really interested in this because I kind of went through like a bunch of like new agey phases and stuff, and like vision boards or like kind of all that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
think, so I wonder, like, like depending on whatever kind of like set of belief you go by, there's always like a ritual aspect of it. What does that like ritual of praying kind of look like for you? Do you have to do a specific like set of like movements, or like do you have like a specific way you phrase your asking for help? Like, kind of, what is that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's pretty informal for me most of the time. I try to pray frequently throughout the day, and so it's like, did you ever see the movie Lady Hawk?
I haven't.
Where Matthew Broderick's character, he's always chatting with God, It's like super goofy, but I think that's a good way to be, is to just be kind of like praying throughout the day, instead of just when you like need something.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just like, okay, Heavenly Father, I'm working on this thing, I'm stuck, help me get through it. I think if I'm really stuck, then it might be more formal, like getting down on my knees and saying it out loud. But normally it's not like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, like, I definitely think at least like taking the time to be like, I need help on this. And it can be like you said, like for you, you're like asking God, but it could also be like asking a friend, or it could be just also being honest enough with yourself to be like, hey, I'm struggling with this specific thing, and that already like just clears up so much of like the uncertainty, because then it's like, oh, now I know what I need to focus on. I think that's really cool.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just saying that, like, even if you don't have a faith, I could see that as being something that is opening yourself up to like when you're putting the pressure on yourself to think through a situation. A lot of the times I feel like there's like this cyclical nature to like I can't think of something, I'm a piece of shit. Like, why can't I think of something? I'm so stupid. Oh, I haven't thought of something again. It's what time is it? It's been this long that I've been sitting here. And you're like thinking about it, and as opposed to just letting yourself really think about it and accept, some other thought that comes through. So just trying to challenge or channel your mind and find a way to take the pressure off yourself, because in your case, it's like, help me find guidance. It's sort of like the envisioning that someone's holding your hand through a situation, or but in somebody else's case, it might be just that, like, it's going to work out one way or another, and that's the hand that's walking me through the situation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because I think sometimes we get blocked, and we're not very good at identifying why we're stuck. I'll be working on something. It's like, oh man, why am I not motivated to finish this? Or why am I not like figuring it out? And I realize like, oh, it's because I need to turn off this podcast that I'm listening to, and like there's this decision early on in the process that I never committed to, and I need to figure that out, and then it's going to help me solve this problem in the drawing part of it. And like I don't, because I'm distracted and I'm listening to stuff and I'm not paying attention, then I'm not making that connection that like, oh, I have other things that I haven't figured out, and that's what's preventing me from solving this problem. So yeah, giving yourself space and silence and time to just think through it is good.
Yeah. That is so well said. And probably we could all take that advice from Mike. Make a little space for yourself. Turn off the podcast and focus on your creative work.
But not yet. It's not done. Don't turn off the podcast.
No, but I think that V is trying to cue up the podcast being done. V has segued.
And with that, it's the end of this creative block. Mike, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
I just wanted you to be able to say the like and subscribe part at the end. That's all.
It's going to be at the end. It's going to be at the end. Don't worry about us.
Yeah, they have to stick around and listen to our our post-amble. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You were a delight.
Thank you, Sean V. This was awesome. I had such a good time. Thank you for having me on.
I'm Sean, and thanks to our listeners. Follow us on social media at CRTV Block, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor, Clemens, for editing the podcast, Marco for helping us produce the show, and Ibuka for creating short clips that we've been putting out.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews and access to our Discord community. Another great way you can support our podcasts is to like, comment, subscribe, talk to your friends about it, talk to your parents, your grandma. More ears on the podcast, the better it is for us to reach out to more guests and just become bigger. Click the link in the description of this episode to read The Hamburglar Goes to Hell by Mike Grover. I've been your host, V.
And I was Sean. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.